Every great journey begins with something raw, unshaped, messy, complex. For us, it begins with numbers, data scattered like fragments on a page. On their own, they're incomplete, but within them lies hidden meaning, stories waiting to be uncovered. In the hands of actuaries, these numbers take shape, fold by fold, calculation by calculation. The scattered fragments transform. What was once flat and ordinary becomes structured. What was once hidden emerges as insight, patterns, and meaning. And when insight takes flight, it no longer belongs only to us. It carries purpose, reaches people, individuals, families, and communities. It shapes policy, strengthens systems, and protects futures. It builds progress, guiding society through risk, uncertainty, and change. Like a Rubik's Cube, the challenges we face are intricate, multi-layered, sometimes daunting. But with skill, patience, and perspective, the pieces begin to align. We bring clarity from complexity. We unlock the patterns that guide decisions for the future. And when the puzzle is solved, we look up, above the numbers, beyond the calculations, into the space of imagination, of innovation, of impact. Together, we rise to meet tomorrow's challenges and to shape the opportunities of the future. Welcome to the ASA Convention 2025. Welcome beyond the numbers.
Morning. For a tall person, this feels quite low. So my name is Ricardo Smith. I'll be one of your hosts this morning. I'm the chair of the Actuarial Convention Plenary, and on behalf of the Actuarial Society, would like to welcome you to the 52nd edition of the Actuarial Convention. I wish I could tell you what happened 52 years ago, but I'm not old enough, though I do see some people in the room who might share a few insights if you can find them. This is the flagship event. We've got 2,000 industry professionals across investments, short-term life, pensions, wider fields, etc. So do mingle, do interact, and think about the purpose and impact that actuaries have beyond the numbers, which is our theme for this year. And in a world of increasing uncertainty, the role of an actuary has never been as important as it is now. We'd like to thank the sponsors who make this possible. SA3, Discovery, Sapiens, WTW, Enix, RNA Analytics, Sanlam, Insight, Accuate, Genry, MBE Consulting, Cycle, Liberty, Milliman, All Mutual, RGA, Swiss Re, Hanover Re, Software Alliance Limited, Colorfields, Africa Re, Communicate Recruitment, Network Finance, IACA Consulting, Actuaries. Kind of felt like a bit of a wrap-up, but these are quite important to individually thank as they make this possible. Also would like to thank and encourage everyone here to actually visit our partners at the ASA Hub. So the Actuaries Without Frontiers and the great work that they are doing. Actuaries in the Making, Association of South African Black Actuarial Professions, South African Actuarial Program, South African Actuarial Development Program. I had to get that right because I came through that program myself. And WeSolve. These are quite instrumental in developing the future generation of actuaries and ensuring that beyond our corporate impact, we have a greater impact through the generations. In as much as it is a prestigious thing to be an actuary, it is the people who are actuaries who make it prestigious. And so we need to constantly build that pipeline. I'd like to thank ASA, the various committees, and all of you for coming through and actually making this work. Without further ado, I don't have a lot to say. Just would like to introduce the video, a welcoming video from the President of the International Actuarial Association. Thank you.
I'm delighted to send greetings to the 52nd ASA Convention, though I'm sorry I can't join you in person. I would have loved to be there again after my wonderful visit last year, where Costa and the ASA team made me feel so welcome. I'd like to congratulate Costa on his excellent presidency and warmly welcome Nalan Naidu as President-elect. I'm really looking forward to engaging with him through the IAA. Creating clarity amid uncertainty. What a powerful articulation of our profession's purpose. Your new brand essence captures exactly what actuaries do. And in today's world of climate risk, cyber threats, and rapid technological change, this message resonates far beyond South Africa's borders. The International Actuarial Association deeply values its relationship with ASA. South African actuaries contribute significantly to the global actuarial conversation, particularly in climate risk management, innovative product development, and addressing financial inclusion in developing markets. Your perspectives enrich our entire profession. I wish you all a productive and inspiring convention. May your discussions create the clarity that guides us all through the uncertainties ahead. I look forward to hearing about the insights you generate together. Thank you and enjoy the convention.
Thanks. Would like to welcome my co-host, Nastasia Arendse, to introduce the video from the Actuaries Without Frontier. I particularly like their tagline, which is, you can't learn mathematics on an empty stomach, or you can't learn mathematics hungry. I'm paraphrasing. It's quite an important initiative. Please do look at the banners, do donate, and do support this important work. Thank you. Nastasia.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. So as he mentioned, this year's Actuaries Without Foundation Convention Challenge is going to focus on nutrition support for schools. And it's inspired by the simple truth, which, as he mentioned, you can't teach a hungry child mathematics, and by contributing 400 Rand, you can feed one child for a month. And the goal is to raise 500,000 Rand to support over 1,250 children through this initiative. And of course, you can donate using the QR code that is displayed throughout the venue, and also your pocket program, or visiting the AWF stand at the ASA Hub, which is in the exhibition hall. So without much further ado, let's have a look at that video.
You can't teach a hungry child maths. Without food, no learner can truly focus, thrive, or reach their potential. This year, through Actuaries Without Frontiers, we've set a bold goal: 500,000 by the 6th of November, the final day of the convention. That's enough to feed 1,250 children for 1 month. Each grocery basket costs just 400 Rand. And that's what it takes to give one child the nourishment they need to learn, to grow, and to hope. But we can't do it alone. So we're calling on employers, firms, and members to multiply their impact by pledging upfront, by setting an example, and showing that as a profession, we stand together. And here's the good news. Every donation qualifies for a Section 18A tax certificate. So not only do you change lives, but you'll also receive a benefit back. Think about it. 400 Rand feeds one child for a month. 40,000 Rand feeds 100 children. The impact grows when we multiply it together. The hunger divides when we share the load. A hungry child cannot learn, but a nourished child, that child can dream, can achieve, and can change the world. So let's multiply our impact. Let's divide hunger. Together we can reach 500,000 Rand. Together we can change lives and start building the next generation of maths-loving actuaries, one grocery basket at a time.
Thank you for that. So next up we have a speaker who is perennially the highest ranked session on the convention program. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to have him back once more this year. Please put your hands together for Jeremy Gardiner.
Right, good morning, welcome. Thank you for having me back. I really do appreciate it. It surprises me every single year, because as I say, I can't teach you anything. Clearly, I entertain you, but obviously you tick the right box, and I'll be back all the time, because I enjoy this most out of all of my presentations, and I do about 3 a week, because this is the most incredible ones. I mean, you just get everything. Thank you, Ricardo, Nastasia, for having me here as well. I see record numbers today, over 2,000 of you sitting in here, and I love that, because let's be honest, the people in this room could work anywhere in the world, but you choose to be here to make a difference, and that's what we have to do. We're going to make this country great. And I think it is looking better. Someone said to me the other day, someone said, you were quite positive last year, you know. And I said, yes, and look what our stock market did. I mean, we're comfortably out, almost double, triple the Americans in dollars. I think we bottomed, and that's what I'm going to try and put across to you today. I think we bottomed mid-2023. I think we're heading in the right direction. I think we're looking quite a lot better now. But we've got to keep it on this trajectory. We've got to fight to keep it on this trajectory, because there are some that want to derail us and take us in a different direction. There's good news and there's bad news. I'm sure you're all suffering from Trump and tariff fatigue. Now, I've got, as I say, good news and bad news. The bad news is I can't provide you relief, because there are very few slides that don't include the word either Trump or tariff or both. The good news is that I'm going to hopefully give you some sort of insight into what is happening in this crazy world. So let's start off, as always, with a video, and then we'll go into the presentation itself.
As Donald Trump digs in his heels on tariffs, global markets are in free fall. Financial capitals in Paris, Frankfurt, London,
But don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question.
Some investors using a new phrase to describe Trump's on-again, off-again tariff threats.
It's interesting now because the bromance between Elon Musk and Donald Trump is well and truly over, and Musk has been very critical, of course, of this bill.
Putin really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening. There's a little bit of a problem there, and I don't like it. They don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
American stealth bombers and submarines launched a massive coordinated attack targeting 3 key nuclear sites.
You know, it's a kind of a different meeting.
Occupy land. That's who we are.
There will continue to be engagement between South Africa and the United States.
It's South Africa's biggest agricultural export, with citrus products destined for the U.S. alone accounting for $132 million.
The JSE achieved a new record high on Tuesday. The boost was driven by all sectors traded positively.
And I think that is what frustrates us. We need to punch above our weight as a country, and we can do it. Okay, but there's a lot going on across the world. IMF growth figures at the beginning of the year. On the left, January forecasts. On the right, April. Okay? Just 100 days later. So you can see the world started optimistic, then the world got terrified, factored in the worst case scenario, and growth numbers plunged. The good news is they're rising again. So this is the September, end of September, going forward numbers for 2025, and you can see that they're looking quite a lot better. Why? Because the markets are factoring in not the worst case scenario, tariff-wise. Okay, so let's look at tariffs quickly. The problem with tariffs is that most Americans don't realize who pays the tariffs. They think the tariffs are paid by the Chinese when they export into America. They're not. They're paid at the point of entry into America by an American company or American person who, chances are, will then pass it on to the US consumer. So the tariffs will hit the US consumers the hardest. You can understand why Trump's doing it. He wants to reindustrialize the Rust Belt, Middle America, where all jobs went off to Asia. The problem is that you can't just make people produce in America, because American labor is, first of all, too expensive. They've all seen the movies. They want the American dream. Big house, leafy suburb, 2 cars parked outside, preferably Teslas, kids going to school in the little yellow bus. That costs money, and there's someone somewhere else in the world that'll do it for less. Also, American labor is fussy. They don't want to do the dull, dreary, dangerous, dirty jobs. So the result is the tariffs will be paid, they'll probably be passed on to the consumer, and everything's going to cost more. It's like an extra sales tax for the Americans. I mean, half the cars sold in America are imported, 25% tariff. The tariffs all go to the US government, so you hear governments saying that they've got more money, but I think when the American consumer realizes that they've been paying it to the American government and that prices have gone up, I think they're going to get grumpy. Because that is Trump's biggest problem. If you ask Americans for the last 3 years, more than 50, and the year before that, 49% of Americans say their biggest issue, more than anything else, is inflation. Cost of living increases, prices going up. Now, prices are going to go up because of tariffs, and that's going to be his challenge, is to give them some benefits so that they don't just feel that prices have gone up. And he hasn't got long. He's got to get to the midterms at the end of next year. So one of the things he's going to do is he's going to bring interest rates down more. We were going to get interest rates cuts anyway, but the Fed is wary of inflation. So as you can see here, you can see the speed with which interest rates went up here, the black there being the American interest rates, 4 consecutive 75 basis point increases. And you can see that they've come down, but not that much. Why? Because the Fed is wary of inflation. Trump is going to bring them down more than they should. Not good for American inflation, not good for trust in American assets, but good for markets. Markets will be excited about it and probably good for the economy. So the problem is Jerome Powell is not being compliant. He's independent of government, so he's not listening to Trump, and this irritates Trump. So Trump said recently, I know much more about interest rates than they do, and certainly much more than the one who's making the decision. There'll be an economic slowing unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates right now. I mean, can you imagine your president speaking to you if you are head of the US Federal Reserve, probably very conservative. Anyway, Jerome Powell's contract ends at the end of May, so he may get removed before then by Trump, or he may just go at the end of May when someone more compliant will come in. Either way, you're going to get more interest rate cuts. The dollar doesn't like this. Dollar index had its worst first half since the 1970s after a decade of outperformance. Okay, let's turn to what happened here, because, it's not every day that someone from South Africa gets to be at that table with a key to the Oval Office from Pretoria, nogal. This is front page of Time magazine, beginning of the year, and to get to be at that table, you've got to do something fairly spectacular. And he did. Contributed $288 million, nearly 6 billion rand to Trump's campaign. There's a school of thought that believes that he actually pushed Trump over the line, that he wouldn't have got there if it wasn't for Musk. But I think we all knew that bromance was going to end. There's no ways that you can have two such powerful people in the same room, such egos, etc. Now, why did the fight start? The fight started quite rightfully when Musk complained about the big, beautiful bill, saying it was meant to be budget neutral or balanced budget. Okay? Because it wasn't meant to add to American debt. And a lot of people are getting worried about American debt. A lot of you will be worried about global debt even. Here you can see share of global debt by country. In the top left quadrant, you can see the United States is a third. So if debt becomes a problem, if American debt becomes a problem, it's going to be a problem, and quite a big one. The thing about debt is only a problem when it becomes a problem, when everybody wants their money at the same time. But US debt sitting at $36 trillion at the moment. The balanced budget is not going to be balanced. It's going to add $3.8 trillion. US debt to GDP, 35% in 2007, 100% and rising 2025. So Moody's cut their top credit rating. Chinese holdings of US treasuries cutting back at the lowest level since 2008. So the fight continued. Trump took it personally. Trump then threatened to take away his electric vehicle subsidies, his space subsidies, and the fight progressed. And then Musk dropped the bombshell. As Zapira puts here, mirroring the Coldplay concert that we saw, the Coldplay concert expose. And this is a problem for Trump, because this thing is still haunting him. Here you have approval ratings of US presidents 100 days into their presidencies. Okay, this was in the middle of the tariff issue. And then there you can see, second from the right, there is the current term. And he's got to get that number up. It's at the lowest level it's been, I think, ever at the moment, sitting at about 37%. To put that into perspective, I think Keir Starmer at the moment is at about 13%. I'll come to that in a moment. But Trump's got to get that above 50% before the end of next year. Because in November next year, you have what's known as the midterm elections. Trump did very well last year to win both the House and the Senate. But if he loses either of those next year, it wasn't a good day for him yesterday either. New York mayor went against his wishes. You saw what's going on in California. That could be critical next year. So if he loses either of those, then he will be what's known as the lame duck president for the remaining 2 years of his presidency. US government shutdown today marks 36 days in, breaking the record. You'll see that all over the news later today when the American Day starts. 36 days in. This is the longest. You can see the second longest was 35 days. They went through that yesterday. Also, that was during Trump's first term. Stocks tend to ignore this. Bonds get a little bit of flight to safety benefit, but not much. What's Trump doing? He's closing projects. He's closing funding to Democratic states. He's firing people. And he's also blaming the Democrats for everything. And that's why it's going to be very hard for the Democrats to come out of this positively, because his voice is louder. The Democrats don't have a leader at the moment, and that means that their voice is not getting heard. 1.5 million Americans will not be paid this week. The shutdown plus US rate cuts plus our exit from the grey list has got some analysts putting the rand as high as 16.50. But as The Economist said about a month ago, this was their front cover. This is the problem that the Democrats face at the moment. Because on the left, you can see that the Republicans are organized with Trump in the middle. And on the right, you've got a leaderless Democratic Party at the moment. Who could it be? It could be Gavin Newsom. Let's see. But they've got to do something about that, because they're going to run out of time if they don't do it fast. Okay, turning to Europe. Trump has a problem with the entire European Union construct. In fact, as he says, the whole European Union was put together just to screw America, and I quote. So he's never been happy with the European Union as it exists. So they've got a big trade deficit with the Europeans and Americans. They've got a deal. Finally, they've got a deal, and it's a good deal for the Americans, not so much for the Europeans. Not bad for the Europeans. So the way it works is all European goods that go into America pay a 15% tariff on entry. All right. On top of that, the Europeans are going to buy $750 billion of US oil and gas, and they're going to invest $600 billion investment. This is where it becomes one-sided to the Americans. All American goods going into Europe will be subject to a 0% tariff. Ursula von der Leyen said it's a good deal. It could have been 30%, which is one way of looking at it, but she would say that. She was the architect of the deal. The French and the Germans clearly unimpressed, and quite rightfully so. But as I said, European goods into America, 15% tariff paid by the Americans, as this video shows.
U.S. will impose a 15% tariff on most European products we import. American businesses will pay those tariffs and pass the cost along to consumers by raising prices.
It is amazing what individual products we could see impacted here, from autos to Botox, as a result of these tariffs.
Right, so all the important goods are going to go up for the American consumer. Whilst in Europe, wasn't that lovely? I mean, I was reading an article the other day, a French article, and they said it was a very French robbery at the Louvre. That's the Louvre, by the way, where they stole the jewelry. They said that it's not as though they stole a beautiful painting like the Mona Lisa that everybody's emotionally attached to, and everybody would have been upset that it's now been stolen, could be damaged. These are jewels that, as the article said, are meant to be worn, not sit in a glass cabinet. The company that made the forklift, as you can see there, has already got this advert running. They came straight out with the advert that said, when you need to move fast. And I mean, the entire thing took 7 minutes. It's quite something, isn't it? The Parisians are most amazed that there were Parisians awake at 9:30 in the morning to actually do this. UK growth. So Europe's looking good. Their inflation is under control. They've got their deal at 15%, not bad. Turning to the UK, why do we care about the UK and Europe? Because these are our trading partners. They buy our goods. If they buy our goods, it creates jobs, and jobs are critical for us. If we create jobs, we solve a whole host of problems. If we destroy jobs, a whole host of problems arise. And with the Americans buying less of our goods, we need the UK and the Europe buying more of our goods. So if they're not doing well, we struggle. Now, they've got a very good trade deal. They've got a trade deal of 10%. Why? Because they worked out how to play Trump. And I'm going to come to that in a moment. They had their Trump card. But their problem is a fiscal one. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has got a 30 to 40 billion pound hole in her autumn budget that she's got to fill in about 3 weeks' time. So she's looking all over the place. She's either going to have to raise taxes, which she promised they weren't going to do, or they're going to have to cut spending. Keir Starmer is also not having a great time. He's gone from the largest majority win this century in the elections last year to the most unpopular prime minister ever. So that's quite a distance to travel in the space of 1 year. They're going to grow about 1.4%, slightly ahead of us. So Rachel Reeves is looking at a whole variety of different places to find money. One of the places she's looking is by removing the non-dom tax loophole. Now, non-doms are people that lived in the UK but didn't pay tax on their global assets. So let's have a look at that. What this chart shows you is countries in blue that are attracting millionaires and countries in red that are chasing away millionaires. Now, these are dollar millionaires. Okay, so 17.5 million rand and up, not rand millionaires. Now, we all know we've got a problem with losing taxpayers. Our pool of taxpayers is getting smaller, which is not good. We should be expanding the amount of taxpayers, creating jobs, more taxpayer revenue, etc., but we're not. So you probably would think that we would be at the bottom of this list in terms of chasing away dollar millionaires. Well, interestingly, we're not. The writing's small, so I'll just tell you, we're about 2/3 of the way down this list. According to this chart, we are going to lose 250 dollar millionaires this year. It's not good. Okay, these are taxpayers, they generally have businesses, they bring jobs, etc. 250. But at the bottom of the list, the UK is predicted to lose 16,500 of the, and similar sized population, South Africa and the UK, roughly about 60 million each. I say roughly because I'm not sure we know how many people are in this country, and I don't think the Brits know how many people are in their country either. But 16,500 dollar millionaires to leave Britain this year. So, as I said, what has changed for the non-doms? Now they're going to, so previously they didn't pay tax on their global assets, now they're going to be hit with 40% UK inheritance tax on their global assets. So obviously they don't like that. And there's competition for these wealthy people. The UAE offers them 0 personal tax, which is what some people that were here now live in Dubai, etc. Italy flat 200,000 euros, Trump $5 million gold visa is what's being mooted. But as I say, she's got that problem, but it's also a warning to us, to our government, to SARS, that you can only tax the rich so much because they are mobile and they can move. But what's interesting is numbers coming out last week show that actually, as opposed to the Brits that have got a massive hole, SARS in September revenue collected 925 billion versus 907 billion, which was expected. That's amazing. SARS, one of the many institutions in this country that are very well managed. Be very thankful for that. Our financial affairs have been in very good hands for the last 20 years, 25 years, and 30 years, and that is very, very important. Once your financial affairs, SARS, Treasury, etc., once your financial affairs get into the wrong hands, the country slips very quickly. Year-on-year tax revenue growth up 9.3%. So that is good news for us. Right, let's talk about war. Because the war in Ukraine has brought the possibility and the reality of war right to the doorstep of Europe. And now that they can't rely on the Americans to come to their aid, they've got to start getting their defense up. They're going to spend 800 billion euros in the next 5 years raising their defense. Now, I think I've played this to you before, but I'll play it to you again because it's basically how Trump manages to bring people to the negotiating table. So he's done that in the Middle East, but the problem is that he declares then that the ceasefire is there, the war is over, and sometimes the heavy lifting still has to come. But it's the fact that I think that people know that he could be slightly unhinged, and that he might actually do 90% of what he says he's going to do, his threats he doesn't do, but there's a 10% chance that he might. And I think this sums that up quite nicely.
I was also the only president where Russia didn't take over a country during my term. Russia took over not because I got along with Vladimir Putin very well. I said, Vladimir, don't do it. You know, you and I are friends. Don't take over any countries because, you know, Moscow will be hit very hard. Well, I told him things. He probably didn't believe it, but you know what? He believed it 10%. And President Xi believed it when I talked about Beijing. He probably said, I don't believe him, but there's a 10% chance we're not going to do anything. It's true. It's true. You have no idea. These conversations, I wish they could have been recorded, actually. People would think a lot of me. But with Bush, they invaded Georgia, right? With Obama, they took Crimea. With Biden, they're trying to take everything. And he won't even know they took it.
I mean, can you imagine being up against that on the campaign trail? Okay, turning to Russia, Ukraine, 3.5, nearly 4 years. Ukraine's still saying exactly what they said from the beginning. They want their land back, they'd like NATO membership, and they want to guarantee this won't happen again. Not unreasonable requests. Problem is, Trump promised Putin on day 2 of his presidency that Putin could keep the land he's gained, and that is what's causing to be the sticking point. Zelensky in the White House 2 weeks ago getting shouted at apparently by Trump telling him to accept Putin's terms or be destroyed. But the Europeans are rallying around Zelensky and saying, no, we're not going to accept Putin's terms, because if you're going to allow Putin to attack Ukraine, capture land, keep it, and have sanctions lifted against him afterwards, there is a chance he's going to think this is quite a good idea and do it again. But as Zelensky says, Putin doesn't want peace, he wants Ukraine, and I think that might be true. Also interesting to see Europe, UK, and Canada donating frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. So Putin is going to be fighting against Ukraine, which is going to be funded by Russian assets to fight against Putin. So it's quite complicated. Middle East war, over after 2 years, all hostages returned. That was a huge result, and I think Trump can take some credit in that. But the problem is now you've got to carry on with the process. Hamas has to disarm completely. That's not going to be easy. Interim coalition government, excluding Hamas, that's also not going to be easy. The Arab leaders pushed Hamas to accept. I think Trump pushed Netanyahu to accept. Hopefully, success will depend on both parties sticking to the agreement details, but certainly a big step forward compared to where we were. I interviewed this gentleman 2 years ago at a conference in London. When I interviewed him, he just stepped down as head of the UK Armed Forces. So this is clearly someone who knows about war. And he said the following. He said, I don't see us, because I said to him, aren't we lucky to be what's known as a post-war, living in what's known as a post-war generation? He said he doesn't see it that way. He says he thinks a big war is coming. He says, I think our generation in future will be remembered as the pre-war generation. Strong words from somebody who probably knows a lot more than any of us in geopolitics. And I think one of the things that makes the Europeans and the Brits so nervous is the fact that whilst everyone's been watching Iran, Russia has been quietly building their nuclear stockpile. These are nuclear warhead inventories per country, and you can see that Russia's got a lot more than America, a hell of a lot more than China, and a hell of a lot more than anyone else. So if Russia were to go rogue, and the Brits and the Europeans would argue that Putin is capable of going rogue, then we're going to have a problem. So you're starting to see headlines like this in Britain. I mean, this wasn't that long ago. Because they've suddenly realized that they have to get ready for war. But the Brits have found that they've got a problem. They haven't got enough troops. They've only got 74,000 troops in the army. We're roughly the same. I'm going to come to that. 74,000 is not enough. It's not even enough to fill Wembley. So they started actually talking about compulsory military conscription. Isn't that interesting? I mean, can you imagine this generation going to the army? They're not going to like it at all. They did a couple of surveys whilst compulsory conscription was being mooted. And the answer came back very quickly from the surveys, saying, as you can see there, as military top brass call for a citizens' army to face down Mad Vlad, 90% of us say we'd refuse to fight. Meanwhile, health chiefs say many Brits would be far too fat to be much use in a war anyway. But what I quite liked was the reasons given by the youth in the surveys for why they don't join the army anymore. Because 20 years ago, it was a very respectable thing to do, to join the British Army, or the army here. The British Army was considered as good as going to university. So people would join the British Army. They can't do that anymore. They don't do that anymore. What are the reasons? The reasons given very simply, it's got a reputation for long hours, apparently, over-discipline and poor pay. Who would have thought? Apparently it's dangerous. They say you could wind up in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Russia. They say travel. It's got travel, but not in a good way. It's not chilled. They're not proud of Britain. They definitely wouldn't fight. And interestingly, they don't identify with being marched around endlessly in a square. Now, if you're thinking we're any better, apparently we're not. We better hope that Russia doesn't decide that they want a strategic foothold on the bottom tip of Africa, because I'm not sure what we would do. I mean, imagine if Russia arrived with a couple of battleships, Durban or Cape Town. I mean, they probably wouldn't even need a couple, just one. I mean, we'd probably welcome them, as friends. But I'm not sure what we'd do if they decided that they weren't going to leave, because apparently our hardware isn't really working. We spend less than 1% of our GDP on military, which is probably not a bad thing, but NATO spends 2%, that's going up to 5%. Illegal mining, what our army spends most of its time combating illegal mining, safeguarding ESCOM, and anti-gang control. Our army is aging. Apparently the average age of a soldier is 40, ideally it should be 23 to 25. And apparently we're not terribly fit. But where our army differs fundamentally with the UK is the UK youth don't want to join the army. In South Africa, 5,000 applications for next year, 225,000 applications. Young South Africans that just want a good job. And that is the saddest thing. If there's any consolation or any silver lining to this, you would have seen talk about 2-3 months ago in the papers, one of the ministers saying that the chance of a military coup in South Africa was not impossible. Apparently, according to analysts, it's unlikely. Turning to China, also very important that they get a deal. China, why do we care about China? Second biggest economy in the world, biggest consumer of commodities, our biggest trading partner. They're having a problem with the Americans are having a problem with them. They've tried 4 times, including last week, for a deal, still no deal. 12-month truce, why no deal? Because the Chinese are very different to what Trump was dealing with in his first term. President Xi is an engineer, he's very calm, he's very controlled, he's very on message, he's very collected. Trump and Xi have had a cultural clash. Trump was rude about President Xi. Nobody in China is rude about President Xi. Certainly not going to take it from Trump. So President Xi designated his vice president, He Lifeng, to deal with the tariff negotiations. Okay? Xi briefed this gets complicated, to keep a firm mandate in dealing with the Americans, and they have. Chinese are not capitulating. They're very different to how they were last time Trump was in. They're losing out trade-wise. Vietnam have become the primary exporter of laptops to the US. India have gained significant smartphone share. US imports, Chinese share of US imports dropped from 13.7 to 7.7 in a year. They will get a deal. Trump needs Chinese rare earths. China needs microchips. So they will eventually get there. Interesting to see China moving their exports to Africa up 25% year on year. Bitcoin, I'm not going to say a lot about Bitcoin, just a couple of philosophical points. One, having a crypto-friendly president in the White House will help. Okay, there's no doubt that he legitimizes it. You're seeing all the big institutions now starting to offer, and there's no doubt that he promotes institutional buying. Now, I also know that wealth creation without work is very appealing, particularly to younger generations. Okay, they're not happy with returns of 8 to 12%. They want 100%, preferably 200%, but it doesn't always work that way. The other thing is, my advice, tread carefully. Sitting at about 100,000 today, if you buy one today, it could be 70,000 in 2 months' time, and you've got to be cool with that. It could be 200,000, but it could also be 70. It's going to be volatile. Also, store it carefully. You hear horror stories about people who store it with the company, then the founders go to live in the Bahamas with your Bitcoin, and you've got no one you can complain to. Also, if you're going to store it in a digital wallet, make sure you remember the password. It's little things like that that are important, and don't bet the farm. AI, normally at these sort of conferences, you'll have a lot of talk on AI, and I'm sure you will. I've got 2 slides on AI, which I think encompass how a lot of people feel. The first is a quote by a top British author, which I think, as I say, sums up how a lot of us feel. And she said the following. She said, I want AI to do my laundry and my dishes so that I can do my art and my writing. Not for AI to do my art and my writing so that I can do the laundry and the dishes. And that's the thing. We want the AI to do the dirty, dull, dreary stuff. We were at a conference last year. We had the head of AI at Process speaking, part of the Naspers group. Very smart. And he said the following. He said, don't avoid AI. He said, use it. Treat it as an arrogant intern. And I think that sums it up. It's there 24/7. It'll do whatever you tell it to do. It's not going to go to the loo. It's not going to go sleep at night. It's not going on holiday. It's going nowhere. But he's getting a bit more arrogant. I asked ChatGPT a question the other day. It came back and said, poor question, rephrase. So I had to rephrase. So there's going to be some of that, but embrace it. Hendrik de Tooy, our chief executive, who's very wise on these matters, was giving us a rev the other day. He said, drop the defensiveness. If what you do is going to be replaced by a machine, it's going to be replaced by a machine. He said, rather, try and embrace the technology, get ahead of the curve, and see how it can enable you to be better at what you do. And I think that is the learning. I mean, the room was a whole lot of financial advisors, 350, 400 of them. And the question was put to the AI expert, is AI going to replace the financial advisor? And he said, absolutely not. But a financial advisor using AI will take clients away from one that's not. So I think that is the learning. Whatever industry one is in, try and just use it to make you better at what you do. Okay, back to South Africa. Where are we? Now, that orange field is the beautiful country in which we live. The Springbok, that's us, looking cautious, a bit insecure, and a bit nervous. That seems to be our current and constant disposition. So, as I showed you in the video, from the beginning of this year, you started to see an exodus out of American assets, not a bet against America, simply because people were overweight American assets after a long time of US exceptionalism. The money started going to Europe, UK, and emerging markets. Goldman Sachs highlighted this about 8 months ago. They said the flow tide is turning, and we believe emerging markets is catching the first wave. After years of being sidelined by US-centric risk-taking, diversification is quietly reclaiming its place in global portfolios. So risk on is back. That's exciting. That's good for us, and it should benefit us. And it will benefit us, but it's not going to benefit us as much as it should, and we've got work to do. And you saw the GNU breakaway this last weekend. I think this is what they were discussing, and hopefully they can make progress here. Because when Cyril Ramaphosa became president in 2017, there was much excitement that he was going to usher in much-needed reforms. We're going to get the economy thumping, create jobs, create taxpayers, etc. Work has been done, but not enough. In fact, now there's actually a survey that you can watch, put together by Business Leadership South Africa and Crutham, where you can actually see of the promises of reform made, how many have been delivered. The answer is about 10%, apparently. Good news and bad news. Good news that it's 10% more than his predecessor Jacob Zuma did. Bad news because it's not that much. So as a result, we're going to have a lack of growth, okay? Also constant GNU noise. This GNU infighting is not good. I'm going to come to that in a moment, but that worries investors. They see it as political instability, and they also see it as a chance of letting in a populist leader. We need the GNU to mature. We need stability and progress. Because, as you would have seen, front page of the Business Day last week, South African companies are sitting on 2 trillion rand of cash, which could be deployed into the economy if they felt confident enough to do it. Our bonds are offering of the highest real rates in the world, so we're going to get short-term money coming in, but we want that long-term money invested, and for that we've got to create the right environment. Because as our world-class central bank governor, Lesetja Kganyago, said, if you restore investor or consumer confidence, it's free stimulus for you. And it's as simple as that. You need government to come with the reforms and then stand back. The private sector will do the rest. Okay, I mentioned earlier that the Brits have got a 10% tariff. I remind you, we're 30%, so 10% is very good. How did they get that? They worked out what they could dangle in front of Trump. So what did they do? They got the king to invite Trump to Buckingham Palace. Now, you would have seen that about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, all over the press, photo opportunities. He loved it. Why did they do that? Because they worked out, or they found out, that apparently Trump is obsessed with the royal family. Go figure. So I started thinking, what could we do? And this was back in January. What could we do in a similar vein? You know, who do we have that Trump knows that he likes, that can speak sense to him when he's going mad? So I put together a bomb squad. Just like Russia has a bomb squad, I put together a bomb squad. I put in Gary Player. He didn't make it to the White House, but I thought, because Trump knows him, they like each other, etc. I put in Ernie Els. He was there in the Oval Office. I put in Johan Rupert. These are all passionate South Africans, very smart, that care about the country, that can speak to Trump, that can play golf, and they can speak sense to him. Then there was another one that I thought would have helped, who Trump doesn't know, but apparently has said that he would like to know, that I think they should have included in the Oval Office, and that is Charlize Theron. Because I think she would have helped quite a lot. And But I mean, wasn't that meeting incredible? I mean, look at that. That is not a casual fireside chat between two presidents. And I was watching it in Heathrow, you know those televisions with the subtitles and no sound, and I could just tell it wasn't going well because of the body language. But we had to be there. The president had to go. $400 million riding on it, our second biggest trading partner. And I must say, I felt sorry for our president. You know, as he sat there, I thought that can't be pleasant. And I wondered to myself, I wonder if he ever regrets going into politics. You know, I know where he lives in Cape Town. He's got a beautiful house, looks out over the whole of Cape Town. He could be sitting on the veranda having a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, reading a copy of Buffalo Weekly. He doesn't need this in his life. But on the positive side, after post-Trump stress disorder, we have the most sophisticated economy in Africa. We've got 600 US companies that operate in South Africa. The genocide claims were refuted, okay? And that's good news. But what was highlighted very painfully, I think, to all of us, but I'm glad was highlighted on the global stage, because for too long we've been pushing it under the cover, is our high crime levels. This is something that we have to address. Hopefully Operation Vulindlela is going to get onto that next. Also the risk of populism in this country. You must be aware of that risk and how that could change everything. Will this make a difference? I think it's good for the GNU. You know, it is a team build after their fights around the budget. The crime cluster met with business. I always like it when it says met with business, because it means it might happen. US ambassador to be announced shortly. Apparently, Alistair Reuters is doing excellent work in Washington, so I think it sounds like it's going to be him. Let's see. Apparently, they're working on our tariff proposal. Hopefully, we get some tariff relief. Certainly, apparently, the mood out of Washington is a lot more conciliatory than it was in the beginning. I think Trump realizes he's got to get tariffs done. But as Zapira puts it so beautifully, that's essentially how it feels. Everybody just waiting here. You've got the Indians that have been beaten because they were at 30%, but they buy oil from Russia, so they went to 50%. And we all just wait for our turn. So our tariffs are relatively high. They were always going to be high. We do a lot of things that irritate the Americans. We're one of 11 countries with 30% or more. But the good news is 2/3 of what we export, roughly, platinum group materials, is exempt. So that's good news. I mean, we're vulnerable in terms of vehicle production and in terms of citrus and wine. But fortunately, as I say, most exempt. So are tariffs a national crisis? No, they're not a national crisis. Spare thought for Switzerland, long-time ally, friend, the most neutral you can get. We sometimes say we're neutral, but we're not. They are the most neutral. They got hit with 39%. So Swiss watches are going up in America. Canada, long-time ally, friend, 35%, 50%. Who knows where it is at the moment? Brazil, 50%. Of our total global exports, only 8%, 8.5% go to America, 2/3 exempt, only 2.4% of our total global exports subject to the tariff. So as a country, not a crisis. Sectorally, as I said, vehicle production and citrus and wine, and regionally, Northern Cape, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, you'll see job losses. The problem is, and this is going to be interesting to see how our second iteration of the deal comes back, Trump wants ideological changes. I don't think it's that interested in the fact that we're going to buy $1 billion of gas from him, etc., etc. So that's going to be interesting to see how that lands. But there's no doubt we're going to have to be a lot more strategic internationally. The world has changed. We can't afford to put our head above the parapet without asking ourselves, is this going to affect jobs? Because if it is going to affect jobs, we cannot affect to do it. We lost so many jobs during COVID, so many jobs during load shedding. We cannot afford to lose more jobs because we're ideologically opposed as a country to the West, to our trading partners. And you don't have to choose between the West and the rest. We can be friends with both sides and we can trade with both sides, but then we have to be neutral. That has to be our positioning. Back to the GNU, they're not getting on, but they're not really going to get on, and it's fine. This is a marriage put together out of necessity, not out of love, lust, etc. So we just got to accept that it's not necessarily going to be happy. It could have been so different. I mean, this is the week, this is Front Page Business Day, the week whilst the president was making up his mind as to what iteration of the GNU the ANC would go with. And Julius was saying he'll be deputy president and Floyd will be finance minister. So this is all situations we could have been in. The GNU is working. It is making progress. Visa backlogs are clear. Digitization. You're going to be able to go to a bank now to get your ID and your passport renewed. Business and GNU collaborating, that's Operation Vulindlela. That's probably the biggest achievement of Ramaphosa's presidency, fixing the country piece by piece. Electricity largely fixed, that's got us 1.5% growth back. Railways and ports have bottomed and apparently significant progress being made. But they need to start working together in the GNU because more than 25%, more than a quarter of the people that voted last year voted for a populist party. And that is a trend that we don't want to continue. You've got municipal elections, November next year, same time as the Americans are having their midterms. And then at the end of 2027, the ANC have got their leadership conference at Nasrec. Now, Zuma did very well to get from 0 to 15%. But he would have worked out that to get from 15 to 50% is going to take time. And he doesn't have time. He's older than Biden. So he's not going to be able to carry on at the same pace forever. So the concept of reverse takeover of the ANC gets mentioned a lot. All they need to do is put an MK-friendly candidate up against a Ramaphosa candidate at Nasrec. If the MK-friendly candidate wins, shuffle of the GNU, MK in, DA, etc. out. And that is the risk. Grey listing off the list. I'll remind you, we were put on the list February 2023, all 22 items that they were worried about successfully completed. Treasury deserves enormous credit. This is a classic example of Treasury and business, of government and business working together and what we can achieve. Just quickly on gold, normally when the gold price goes up, it's a red flag for the state of the global economy. Above 4,000. Now, the interesting thing is the main reason driving this rise of the gold price was central banks around the world getting a fright as they saw how quickly Russian assets were frozen by the Americans and the Europeans in the wake of the war. And so suddenly, a whole lot of central banks that were worried that they may not always have a rosy relationship with the West started to diverse away from dollar-based assets, buying 100 tons per annum for the past 3 years. Of course, there are a whole lot of other reasons, geopolitics, Fed cuts, FOMO, debt, etc. But that has been a major, major driver. But it has helped us. It's good news for us. JSE outperforming significantly the S&P 500 in dollars this year. Growth is coming back. For the last 10 years, we have averaged 0.8% growth as we struggle to escape from state capture. Now, the consumer's feeling quite a lot better. Electricity fixed, as I said, that gives us back 1.5%. Transnet, apparently, that is where the key driver is going to come going forward. If the improvements there are better than expected, then growth is going to be higher. So we're probably going to come through at about 1.1% growth this year. We would have been 1.8% if it wasn't for the Trump tariffs. We're probably going to come through at about 1.1, 1.2%. But growth is heading in the right direction. As railways and ports improve, it's going to get better. And if we can just get to 2.5% by the end of 2027, I think that'll protect us from a populist leader because the mood in the country will be different. There'll be more jobs, more taxpayers, etc. Let me just end off with a couple of slides. So the Big Mac Index, you all know very well. It's just a rough guide. You've all seen it about cost of living, effectively. So they base it to the Americans, which is fourth from the left, and you can see then, which is at 0, you can see then if you buy in Switzerland on the far left, it's 44% more than buying a Big Mac in Washington. Norway, 26% more, so those are expensive countries. Second from the right, South Africa, 53% less, and I think probably that number is even less. And that's the bottom line. That's why we live in this country. Not because it's cheap, because the quality of life you get here for what we pay. And people often forget that. You say you've got a good quality of life here. They go, yeah, but I've got crime, I've got the... For what you pay. I mean, those of you that have been overseas recently would have been horrified by what things cost overseas. And so nice just to get back here and start spending rands again. In summary, globally, a positive mix, less wars. I put a question mark there. Hopefully the war in the Middle East or the ceasefire holds. Hopefully we can get some sort of conclusion to what is going on in Russia, Ukraine. Low oil price from $75 to $65. That's been crucial in keeping inflation low, which has allowed interest rates to come down. Good for growth. Softer than expected tariffs, although that's got to remain fragile because Trump can change his mind about a video that made was in Ontario and then slap Canada with 10% just like that. US rate cuts coming. There will be more. Trump will probably add an extra 1 or 2. That's what markets are excited. There's fuel to fire. Growth improving. Weaker dollar set to continue as well. That trend is in place going forward. Sky-high AI share prices and valuations and retail frenzy is dangerous. Tread carefully. But all of this, good for RisCon, good for emerging markets, good for South Africa. So as I said in the beginning, I think mid-2023 was our winter of discontent. We'd just emerged from COVID. We were coming out of state capture. We'd just been grey-listed because of state capture. It was pre-GNU. SOEs were collapsing. Massive bailout costs. Remember, every year the bailout cost to SAA. We had level 6 load shedding. We heard rumors that it could go as high as level 15. There was even talk of a total grid collapse. It would then take 2 weeks to get back up again, during which time there wouldn't be ATMs or anything. The railways, the ports were collapsing, which is plunging the economy. Mass corruption, no sign of a plan. And on top of that, the Americans accused us of supplying arms to Russia because of that boat in Simonstown. I mean, we were subsequently proved to not be supplying arms to Russia. Who knows what happened on that boat in Russia, but we're not going, I mean, in Simonstown, but we're not going to ask questions there. But I think that was when we got peak depression. Today, things looking better. GNU, 14 months old, it's making progress. Operation Vulindlela, fixing South Africa one step at a time. As I said, electricity largely fixed, rail ports improved, growth improving and set to continue. Talk yesterday, Bank of America saying in the business day that we apparently are looking at a potential ratings upgrade from Standard & Poor's. Water, crime, municipalities next on Operation Vulindlela's list. We exited the grey list. That is a huge solution. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for having me back here again. We live in a great country. It's up to all of us to work together. I've got 3 friends coming back from London at the moment, 3 couples. They've got young kids. They are so excited to get back. One woman said to me, if one more South African asks her why she's coming back, she's going to throttle them. She says you've got to leave this place in order to appreciate it. And I think that really sums things up. I've got a friend who's an estate agent on the Atlantic seaboard in Cape Town. I said, how's business? She said, it's great. She's taking houses from South Africans who are going to Portugal and selling them to Europeans who see South Africa as their plan B. So I think that, and I mean, I think just to say where we are at the moment, I saw one of the top analysts in the country yesterday, and we were just talking about the fact that South Africa is looking better. And he said to me, would you rather buy a flat in London or in Sea Point? And I think that's actually where we've gotten to, that I think that things are actually looking to the point where we're actually starting to feel optimistic about ourselves. And as I say, the medium-term outlook in South Africa is looking good, and it's a long-term time since we've been able to say that. So let me just leave you on one point. If you're still blue and you don't know what to do, just remember that we're the first country to ever be world champions in Test cricket and Test rugby at the same time. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed that.
Jeremy, before you walk off the stage, I'm not sure. So, Jeremy, we want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us once again. So I've allowed the chair of the convention to hand you a special gift. Thank you so much. So I want to take this moment to walk through a key formalities, because we want to make sure that you have the utmost comfort and smooth experience throughout the event. So a few things that you need to note throughout the exhibition. So we have an origami tree, which is at the Asa Lounge. So all you need to do is fold your design with the origami team who are on standby. They'll add your name and hang it on the tree, and it's meant to be a symbol of reflection and growth. But then all participants who do hang up their origami, you're going to be entered into a lucky draw. And you did notice that Jeremy mentioned that the people who were involved in the heist at the Louvre, they got in and out in 7 minutes, and he said you had to be super awake at that time of the morning to do that. I don't have $100 million of French crown jewels at this convention for you, but what I do have is a hydration station that is sponsored by Hanover Re, so you can make sure to pop in there for a refreshing drink.
Yes, awesome. Also quite a few coffee stations sponsored by Old Mutual, RGA, Swiss Re, SA3, WTW, and Discovery. I feel like I always end up having to list the sponsors which is a great job. I must let them know. Milliman and Liberty are hosting the working lounges where you can charge up, have a short face-to-face, and of course, grab a coffee while catching up on emails.
And we do have a network break, and that network break, or refreshment break, let's call it that, it is sponsored by Network Finance, and the team is on standby, ready to engage with you. You can make your way downstairs at the Exhibition 1, that is where you can find them. And we also have a chess tournament. Do you play chess?
Depends how good you are.
Is that a yes, no? Or
If you're bad, then I can.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we do have a chess tournament, and it is taking place. So the semi-final is going to take place, but then you can catch all the live action and cheer your favorites. But in terms of the prizes that this chess tournament entails, we've got 10,000 for the winner, 5,000 for the runner-up, and 10,000 matched by Moves for Life Educational Trust. And then the second semi-final will be today at 4 p.m. at the refreshment break, and the finals will be tomorrow at 9:20. So we're going to go and see the chess guys to see whether his skills match up to what he just shared with you on stage.
Well, they can play, so I can't.
There we go. Okay, so we're going to be breaking into our refreshment break, and we're going to go into the concurrent sessions at 10:25 sharp. Thank you.
Thanks, enjoy.